Hey guys, I'm very excited today. I have a special guest, Julia Shanks, who is the author of The Farmer's Office, which is a really useful and practical how-to manual on how to balance the budget, how to do your accounting, how to do to track your expenses and customers and all that kind of stuff. It's a super handy book. There's even a chapter in here on how to just use QuickBooks, which is very useful, especially to me. I'm actually in the middle of switching over all of my bookkeeping over to QuickBooks. And so this is going to be a relatively long interview and quite detailed. So we're going to talk about budgeting and balancing your books and different types of accounting and actually how to use QuickBooks to some degree, though to get into any serious level of detail on QuickBooks would require a longer interview. But Julia has a webinar series and a book that covers a lot of that. So I hope you guys might find this inspiring and interesting if you're a farmer and you have kind of put off doing your bookkeeping in a practical way for a long time. This might inspire you to get it going the right way. So let's get into it. So we met in Boston a couple years ago, wasn't it?
Actually, it was just 1 year ago at the Urban Ag Conference. You were the keynote speaker.
That's right, that's right. And that's when we were talking about online courses and stuff like that. You had your book. We're both on the same publisher. We're both on New Society. I got a
Yes.
copy of your book here, which is fantastic. And I think it's super useful for people because there's just this massive void in good information about how to do your books and accounting and crunching the numbers and budgeting in farming. I mean,
Yep.
I wrote about it a bit in my book, but I didn't even scratch the surface compared to the amount of content that you have in your book here. So how did you get into this? Like what inspired you to write The Farmer's Office?
So I've been working with farmers for about 8 years. I'm going to need to get a little more conversational about this. I feel very stiff.
That's fine.
Uh, yeah. But, I've been working with farmers for about 8 years. And, I always get these questions like, how do I make more money? How do I increase my profits? And the first question is, all right, well, let me look at your books
Yeah.
and let's start to analyze the numbers. And they, share their QuickBooks or their Excel spreadsheets, and it's just this mumbo jumbo. And it's really hard to figure out how to make more money if you don't have good records. And then you
Absolutely.
start teasing through and trying to get through the receipts and, well, what did you spend here and what did you spend there? And actually, I'm working with a client right now and, they're not making enough profit and they don't know what to do. And it's a farm, they're generating over $1 million in revenue, but we can't figure it out. We don't know where the money's going. And
Wow.
if you don't know where the money is going, you can't know where to make cuts. And so, we start digging into, the supplies category. And it's like, well, that's not really a supply, that's a this. And well, that was for a special event and that's for production. And it's just this mashup, thousands and thousands of dollars are just going somewhere. And we don't really understand where. And is it a reasonable amount to be spending or not? Um, so at any rate, the long and the short of it is that people have all these questions about their business. Primarily, they want to, earn more profits. They need to figure out if they can afford to borrow money. And if you don't have a good bookkeeping system, then you just can't figure it out. And,
Totally.
it's kind of that old adage, garbage in, garbage out. And as
Yeah.
farmers, you totally appreciate that. You use quality soil and quality soil amendments and seeds, and you think about everything that you put into your growing so that you can grow the best tomato and the best arugula and the best radishes and the best chickens.
Yeah.
And we don't put that same care into the financials because it's like, "Ugh, I'm a farmer. I'm not a bookkeeper. I'm not a business person. I'm a farmer."
That's right.
But you are a business person. And,
Yeah.
the minute you, sold your first head of lettuce, you became an entrepreneur.
Exactly.
So,
Exactly. And
but
I liked what you said. I emailed you about getting this going, and we were talking about my bookkeeping, and you had some great advice. Was just like pour a glass of bourbon and
yes,
just get into it, and it works. It's great because
good. Did you
you
have the
have to kind
bourbon?
of numb the pain a little bit. But you know what?
Yeah.
I am kind of a numbers guy, and I think
Yeah.
people know me for that. I've been big into spreadsheets and tracking data and all that. My finances are totally not as well kept as they could be, though they are pretty
Yeah.
good. My accountant is usually impressed by what I give her.
Good.
But I
Good.
mean, I liked what you said about that, just numbing the pain and getting into it. Because once you jump into it and actually get going, and you can look back and go, okay, I've gone through this and I've gone through that. Then you kind of get into the role with it, and you
Yep.
just go. It's
Yep.
just like the first steps. You just have to do it, and
Right.
it's so valuable once you do. I mean, when I was I've been just kind of doing the bookkeeping for my farm, going through everything and
Mhm.
really analyzing this stuff and going, wow, we spent a little bit more on this than I thought we should
Mhm.
have, and wow, I
Yep.
can't believe we spent this much here, or we barely bought any of this. It's really good to have all that information.
Yep. Yep. And once you start digging into the numbers, we tend to work off our intuition so much, but our intuition isn't always right. And it's good to be able to check with the numbers how things are doing. The other interesting thing that you just said is that you are good at record keeping, but you're record keeping in Excel. And one of the challenges with Excel is just how do you aggregate all the data? How do you compare this year to last year? And having the proper system so that you can really make the most out of the data that you are tracking. And actually,
Exactly.
that client I was just talking about that, they have over $1 million in sales and they still can't answer these questions. It's because they're keeping all this data, but it's just everywhere.
Yeah.
And for the time that they spent on tracking everything, if they tracked it into a single system, then they could actually pull it out so much more easily. And the funny thing is, I was working with a client who raises pigs, and he was like, well, does it make more sense for me to sell whole pigs or pigs butchered into, retail cuts? And, obviously the retail cuts, you make more money per pound, but there's a lot more labor involved.
That's right.
And, you have to take the pigs to be processed and there's more expenses. So how does it shake out versus the retail cuts or versus selling whole pigs? And to answer that question, it took us about 5 minutes looking at his QuickBooks because he had put the time in up front to making sure all the data got into QuickBooks properly, and not just one day sitting there like at the end of the year, oh my God, I've got this big stack of invoices to enter in, but just 5 minutes every day with the bourbon. Bourbon helps. Um, but it's like 5 minutes every day. And then when we went to answer the question, it was like, oh, duh, I make this much on whole pigs. I make this much on retail cuts. I spent this much time on the pigs, retail versus wholesale. And my hourly rate for each one was this much or that much. And it was right there. It took us 10 minutes to do the analysis, but he had put in the time up front. We had worked together to make sure that he knew how to track everything.
So what did he find? Actually, I'm just out of curiosity. Was it the whole pig, or was the retail cuts that was the more
It was
profitable?
the retail cuts.
Right.
It was the retail cuts. And,
Factoring all that in.
dollar for dollar, it was more profitable an hour for hour. So for, if you make $100, do you make $10 or $15 for every $100 you earn in revenue? But then, you may only earn $10 versus $15. But if you put in 30 minutes versus 2 hours, the $10 all of a sudden seems a lot better than the $15 because it took you 30
Yeah,
minutes instead of 2 hours.
absolutely.
So, just different ways to look at the numbers.
Wow. Um, Hold on one sec. I'm just gonna check something here before I ask another question. Monitor. Just want to make sure my audio is good. Okay, it is. So, QuickBooks is amazing actually. I went down a rabbit hole with it last night,
Oh,
and
good.
I even delved into it more this morning. I can't believe that I've been going all these years and not using this this
Yeah.
application.
Well,
It's
I mean, it's
brilliant.
interesting.
I,
Well,
I mean,
I'm
I've got
looking at.
everything synced up. I've got my bank account synced up to it now. I love how
Mhm,
it tracks your deposits and then you can categorize
mhm,
them. And the really amazing thing about it is that it learns. And I don't know how
mhm.
new of a feature that is, but it starts to recognize certain deposits and then it applies certain
Yep,
things
yep,
to it, GST, government sales tax, or it
yep.
categorizes the checks that I write for my worker. Like it's
Yep.
amazing.
Yeah, well, I would say a couple of things though. Well, first of all, the one thing that I think QuickBooks is really great with is also tracking your receivables. So if your restaurant clients or your supermarket franchise clients don't pay you promptly, it's much easier to track who owes you and by how much.
Yeah.
But I will caution you, I know a lot of people download transactions from the bank and it's awesome, but because it memorizes transactions, sometimes it gets a little bit tripped up. So it might just say, oh, Home Depot, that's supplies, as opposed to, well, actually, maybe it was cleaning supplies versus production supplies.
Right.
Um,
Right.
and maybe it was greenhouse versus field. So, it does, you still need to go back and make sure. I talk about sometimes, people abdicate thinking about their financials, and, a lot of times people abdicate to a bookkeeper. Oh, well, I've got the bookkeeper to deal with it. Or you abdicate to the bank, the bank downloads. But it still requires some attention to make sure that you're tracking it the way the way you want it to be. And, it depends on what you're trying to get out of it.
Yeah. What level
Really.
of detail do you think is that pertinent to farmers with, say, those expenses? I mean, when I do my expenses, the way I've been doing it for years is actually I pay my mom to be my bookkeeper, in the sense that I give
Nice.
her all my paper receipts and then she puts them into a
Yep.
spreadsheet. Then I take that
Yep.
and then I do the rest myself.
Yep.
As far as like the tax and all that, I have accountants that do that. But
Mhm.
the categorization. I mean, is that so much like, say, for example, you said cleaning supplies versus building supplies. How pertinent is that
Mhm.
type of information?
Well, when you look at your financials, you're trying to figure out, one, how profitable am I? And two, if I'm not as profitable as I want to be, where is the money going? So, as an example, you might do events on the farm, and, you sell stuff at the farmer's market, you sell stuff to, your restaurant and grocery store clients. So, if you're having an event on the farm and all the event supplies are glommed together with your production supplies,
Yes.
it's hard to see if those events are profitable.
Yep.
Um, and if you don't know how much you're spending on repairs and maintenance versus just general supplies, then it's hard to know, is it time to be replacing things? Am I spending too much? Where's the money going?
Yep.
And also, when you're trying to, what I call troubleshooting profitability, trying to figure out where you're not as profitable as you want to be, the better you organize the expenses, the better you can see where the money goes. So, is the money just going down a black hole of supplies, or is it production supplies? Is it office supplies? Is it event supplies?
Mm-hmm.
So if you get some, more detailed categories, it helps you better understand where your money is going.
Absolutely. And I mean, the ones that seem obvious to me are the
Mhm.
main farm expenses, like how much do you spend on seed? What's your fertilizer costs?
Mm-hmm.
Fuel, all those kinds of things. Those are great for budgeting too, right? And and
Right,
and,
right.
and to the budgeting thing, how important do you think it is for, this is the time people would be doing it, but how important do you think it is for
Mm-hmm.
people to be budgeting going into the next season?
Oh my God. So important. And especially, because farming is so seasonal that, you have you hemorrhage cash in the first quarter of the year, and then it starts to trickle in April, May, and then, the water hose of cash doesn't really turn on until August, September. So, you need to be squirreling away your cash and, between August and October to get you through to the following year. So
Yeah.
if you're not budgeting properly, you can look at the year and say, all right, and, looking at your numbers, it's like, all right, on the whole, I was profitable. I brought in more money, I brought in more cash than I spent. Yes,
Yeah.
good job. But, were you able to have a positive bank balance at all times, or was there, times where the bank balance dipped
Yeah.
because, the cycle of the cash was off?
Yeah.
So yeah, and also if you want to make purchases, um, it's like, sure, you had a positive income, which is great, which is obviously what you want, but, is that income enough to pay for debt service? Can you afford a loan? So, people say, oh, well, I have an income, but then, you need to invest in the business, you need to pay off your debts, and you need to take home money so you can pay your own bills, so you
Yeah.
can, pay your rent, pay for food on your table, maybe take a vacation,
Yeah.
you know,
Exactly.
all the exciting things like that.
Yeah, and
So yeah.
how much do you think, like, what do you recommend to people for, say, checking in with that? Like, do you say to people like, look, spend 1 to 2 hours a week on bookkeeping, or anything like that? Like, what do you think's a good sort of a
Mhm.
workflow or time allocation to do such a thing?
Yeah, no, I think 1 to 2 hours a week is great. The real trick is that you got to make it a part of your routine. And we talked
Yes,
about it, you know, the other day where you were just so slamming jamming with, quote unquote, the real work, and bookkeeping doesn't feel like real work
that's right.
because it's not farming, and
Mm-hmm.
that's what you do.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so it definitely requires a mind shift, how you think about the bookkeeping and how important cash flow is, because if you want to keep doing what you're doing, and obviously there are nonprofits out there that don't need to make a profit and they can get grants to support themselves, but most of us need to
That's
earn a
right.
profit, need to earn enough to support ourselves and our families and all that other good stuff.
That's right. And
So
I
yeah,
mean, sorry, go ahead.
oh no, I was just going to say, so I think it is important. I mean, for me, at the end of the day, obviously I'm not farming during the day, but I'm still tired at the end of the day. So I pour myself a glass of wine or a gin and tonic or a bourbon. And, it's like just go through my wallet and empty out my wallet, make sure I'm spending 5, 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Um, and the wine definitely helps perk me up a little
Yeah.
bit.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so important because it's so easy just to like lose track of that. And one thing I've noticed is that if you're sloppy, it just keeps stacking up, and then
Yep.
you need to get into it at some point. And
Yep.
so,
Yep.
like my wife, who doesn't really, she's relatively new parents, so she's taken a little step back from her career, but she's
Mhm.
been a professional photographer for like 12 years, and her bookkeeping is literally a drawer in
Yeah.
in the desk behind me that is just
Yeah.
full of paper receipts, and I'm just like, I'm not that bad, because like I look at
Yeah.
that, and I mean, her business is a lot more simple than mine are, and
Hmm.
so, but I mean, it's just a pile, and you got to get into it at some point. Now you got to
Yep.
sort through it, and it's like, whereas what you just said is so much more practical. It's just like empty your wallet of the receipts,
Hmm.
log those, put them in a file, and it's done. That might only take you 5 minutes. If
Right.
you do that
Right.
a few times a week, by the time it comes to your year end, it's just so much easier and not stressful.
Yep. Yep. And the thing is, if you wait till the end of the week, then at the end of the week you're really tired and you're like, oh shit, I'll just do that. Can I curse? I'm sorry.
Sure, it doesn't matter.
Yeah. Well, well, it's so
YouTube.
funny because I typically curse a lot. But then I went to a conference and there was a lot of Amish and Mennonite, and I realized I really had to clean up my presentation.
Oh
So,
yeah, 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 yeah. Interesting.
um, yeah, but if you wait till the end of the week, then it's like you're tired and it's like, "Ugh, I don't want to do that. This sucks." And then I'll do it at the end of the month. And then at the end of the month, instead of just having like a little, that much, you now have like
A
that
mountain.
much.
Yeah,
And it's like, forget that shit. I'm doing, oh, wait,
yeah.
God,
I know.
it's August. I can't. So, I mean, I understand August is overwhelming and there just aren't enough hours in the day. But the more you can keep on top of it, the better it'll be at the end of the year and the more you'll know.
It's so true.
And it,
And yeah, it's so hard to do it at that time. Like every year, I mean, I work less and less on the farm because of the other things I do now, but I still am busy during those times, and it's just, in August where it's just so hot, and you're just catching up and so busy, it's like the last thing you want to do. I mean, I
yeah.
think what you said is so true. You just have to put it into your calendar, and just
Hmm.
this hour at each week, this is what I'm doing.
Yep.
And
Yep.
maybe come
Hmm.
inside for the hottest time of the day to do it, and do what you have to
Yep.
do. Drink a coffee, or a bourbon, or both, and just
Yes.
get
Okay.
into it,
Yeah.
and
A
finish
little
it.
Irish whiskey.
Yes,
Yeah. Or Irish
exactly.
coffee. That's it. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. 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 Yeah, and also, it's funny because especially in the summertime, you get stacks and stacks of cash, and you need to make sure that they actually go to the bank. You got to make the time to get to the bank to deposit them, because if you start bouncing checks, then you get yourself into real trouble.
Yeah,
Um, you're incurring fees and fines and penalties, and people are pissed at you.
absolutely.
So, yeah. So,
Absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about QuickBooks. I mean, this is the program that you recommend in the book. You actually have quite a bit of information on it, which is pretty cool.
Yes.
It seems
Hmm.
like a lot of people are using the QuickBooks Online today, and I mean, I can see the practical reasons for that.
Yeah.
I had just set mine up. I just started to put information into it. I don't have anything in it besides from
Yep.
put in a couple
Yep.
in. I don't have any invoices in here. Oh, hold on one second.
Oh. Yep.
Oh, you do? Okay. Oh, you're delivering today, aren't you? Cool. Thanks, Mark. Production's got to keep moving on.
I know, right?
Yeah. So, yeah. So, I mean, for anybody watching this, don't pay any attention to the numbers in this QuickBooks of mine
Right.
because
Right. Right.
none of it's there's
Yep.
no invoices in here. It's just
Right.
expenses.
Well, it's interesting though. So just in the last month or so, QuickBooks has discontinued their desktop version for Mac.
Oh,
So they're really, yeah. So they're really pushing hard to get everybody online. And I mean, it's pretty clear where my bias is. I'm biased towards the desktop version. I find the interface is a lot easier. It's a lot faster. But what's interesting also is for farmers, farmers are working in rural areas where internet is not as strong.
yeah.
So if you're relying on a strong internet to do your bookkeeping, it's just going to be even more frustrating. So, and then the issues with net neutrality. I don't know if,
Yeah.
what's going on in Canada in terms of that, but, now you have to pay for high speed. So I think it's going to be really difficult to force people online this way. So I'm kind of curious to see how that's all going
How
to
that plays out.
shake down. Yeah,
I mean, the internet connection thing isn't an issue for me personally. I'm in the city.
yeah,
I do love the idea of going paperless with invoicing, and
yes,
I haven't explored all the features in QuickBooks on how to do it, but I also love the idea of scanning a receipt and then
yep,
it goes in. You don't have to do anything. You
yeah,
can just scan it with your
right.
phone. There's an app now. Like, I mean, that's incredible. That can save a ton of time. So
Hmm.
that's exciting. But
Yep,
why don't
yep,
we just go through some of the basic things about QuickBooks that
yep,
might be
yep.
interesting to people watching?
Okay, so the first thing I wanted to talk about was the chart of accounts. So the chart of accounts is the backbone of QuickBooks, and it's really how your income statement and your balance sheet are going to appear. So I know the balance sheet is just a mind twist for a lot of people, farmers included. So I don't want to go into that too much now. But so if you go to that little cog on the right, top right,
Yep.
that's where you'll see the option to go to your chart of accounts.
Okay.
And under your company,
Whoops.
it should be yeah.
Chart
So
of
if you go
accounts.
to,
Okay.
yep, under your company. And so this is where you can organize everything. And you can see the name of the account, and you might want to open up the name column and the type column,
Just by
the
clicking up
first two
here.
columns. Yeah, if you can just, if you move your mouse over to the center, you can widen it up.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And then also with your type.
Okay. So this is basically an overview of everything that's going in and out.
Exactly. So every transaction that happens in QuickBooks gets assigned to an account. And then the account tells you where it goes. So, um, if it's discounts, it'll show up on your income statement as revenue. If it's commissions and fees, it'll show up on your expenses, etc. So each of these things tells you where it's going to go. And you are the boss of QuickBooks. So you can rename things that make sense to you. You don't have to go with what they tell you.
Okay.
Um, so see the little triangle on the far right of each line?
Yep.
So if you click on that, you'll see edit.
Yep.
So you can then edit, rename it. If you don't want this to be called job materials, you can call it,
Right.
my lifeblood, whatever.
Right. 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 Yeah.
You can call it whatever you want to call it.
Yep.
So that's number one. The other thing is you can see where it says is a sub account of.
Oh, is that back where I was
So
in the edit thing?
yep, just go back. Yep. So go back to
Yes, is a
edit,
sub
and then
account. Yeah.
so what I like to do is I like to group things, and I like to group things into 5 basic categories just because it makes it easier to read the income statement.
Yes.
So I'll have direct operating expenses or cost of production. I'll have labor, general and admin, things like your bank fee or your internet or the cost of actually having QuickBooks,
Right.
um, repairs and maintenance, and occupancy. So by grouping everything into these 5 broad accounts, then it's a lot easier to see, when you're going over your income statement, trying to figure out where the money is going. It's easier when they're grouped. Otherwise, they're just going to show up in alphabetical order on your income
Can you
statement.
explain for somebody who might not know, what does cost of goods sold mean? That's a common accounting term.
Yes. So cost of goods sold is, what there's 2 ways to think about cost of goods sold. And I know a lot of farmers who think, well, what I'm selling is produce. So the cost of goods sold, my goods are produce. So the cost of selling these products is, the seeds and fertilizer and soil amendments and mulch and, labor to harvest. Those are the costs of goods sold. What
Yep.
does it cost me to produce what I sell? In more traditional terms, cost of goods sold are the things you purchase for resale. So if you're, working in a clothing store, you buy sweaters and then you sell sweaters. You buy shoes and then you sell shoes, and
Yep.
those are your cost of goods sold. If you're in the restaurant business, it's, the food that you buy to then put food on the plates.
Right.
So, whether or not you put your direct operating expenses or your cost of production as a cost of goods sold, now we're sort of splitting hairs. Where do you put it? But it's still, cost of production, whether you call it cost of goods sold or
Yes.
cost of production.
So
You want to track it.
So things like fertilizer and seed or
Mm-hmm.
packing materials would be cost of goods sold for a farmer.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I tend to put it as cost of production or direct
Okay.
operating expenses.
Okay. So that was one of your 5 was direct
Yes.
operating expenses. Okay.
Yep. And what's interesting is that I know a lot of people put payroll under cost of goods sold because the cost of people working on the farm, harvesting and planting and growing and weeding and it's all part of cost of sales. But you definitely want to be tracking your labor separately because your direct operating expenses are going to be your biggest expense, number one. And your second biggest expense, and maybe even your biggest expense, depending on your operation, is your labor. So you want to be tracking those separately and,
Yes.
as one entity. So the cost of having employees isn't just their salaries and wages, it's their payroll tax.
Mm-hmm.
It's workers' comp insurance. It's do you pay employee meals? Do you have
Yeah.
employee meals to pay for?
Yep.
Are you buying their clothing? So what does it
Right.
cost you to have employees on the land?
Right.
So it's really important to group those all together. And you can see that your chart of accounts, everything is alphabetical.
Mm-hmm.
But if you use big accounts, parent accounts like cost of production, labor, repairs and maintenance, then you can put everything else as a sub account of those broad accounts, and it lets you see big categories.
Okay. Okay. Very cool. What are some of the other broad things that we could talk about in QuickBooks that might be helpful to people? I mean, we're not going to go through a full tutorial in this video.
Right.
You've got a book for that.
Yes, I
And
do.
you also have, actually, why don't we talk about that right now? You've got some online stuff happening now. You were doing some webinars, and is the online course done, or where is that at right now?
So the farmer's office is live. You can sign up at thefarmersoffice.com.
Okay, I'll make sure to put a link below too.
Yes. And actually, I've basically done a webinar for the entire book.
Okay.
So, not all at one sitting. It's, broken down into between 5 and 30-minute chunks. So you can, focus in on the chart of accounts or how to create an invoice or how to create a cash flow budget and reading financial statements. So you can, get everything you need in a webinar format as opposed to reading. obviously we all learn differently, and some people do much better reading, some people do better listening and watching. So
Yes,
it's just another way to help people learn.
that's awesome.
Yeah. So I would say the other important thing, and especially for you because you're selling to customers that do not pay right away, whether you call it wholesale or restaurants
Yep.
or, franchisees, you sell to people that do not pay you on the spot.
Yes.
So tracking your accounts receivable is huge.
Yes, absolutely. And
So,
where do we look at that in here? I mean, I don't have any customers put in here yet. I
yeah,
just got this last
yep.
night.
Right.
Um,
So first of all, I would say I wouldn't go through and add your customers right now. I would add your customers as you create invoices, because if you try to do it all at once, you're just gonna, oh God, I just can't even be bothered.
right.
So you can just do it one at a time.
That's a practical way
So
to do it.
yeah, exactly. I mean, it's funny. I'm working with one client who is like, no, I want to do it all now. I want to get my chart of accounts and my items all set up. And it's like, all right, have fun with that.
Right, right. So
Um,
would you say the same thing for products? Like
yeah.
basically set the invoices up as they occur.
Yep. Exactly.
Because
And the other
I went to go do that, and I wasn't sure. The old accounting software I use is called Account Edge, and I don't like it. I'm sick of
Yeah.
it. But one thing I did with it that I do like is that I've got a very cohesive, itemized list of all the products the farm sells, and they're all
Mhm.
done with quick keys. Can we do the
Yep.
same thing in this?
Yes. Yes. So go back to that cog at the top right,
Okay.
and the second column is lists, and go to products and services.
Okay. Add your products and services. So let's add a product and
Okay.
service.
So you don't have anything here yet.
Nothing yet. So would this be, I mean, if we're just doing farm products, would this be non-inventory?
Yep. So these are non-inventory products.
Okay. And so you just go there, you just put
Yep.
all the stuff
Okay.
in and
So you could say, well, hang on a second. I want to point out a couple of things. So you can put the name. So you can do bok choy, arugula, radishes, whatever.
okay.
And you can also, you don't need to put in a SKU. You can put in the sales information is what's going to show up on your invoice.
Right.
And then the sales price or rate. So, it might be worth in the sales information putting the unit that you sell by, whether it's by the case, by the pound, by the bunch,
Yep. Yep.
then
So
the price.
yep. Let's do one in real time kind of.
Yep.
Now, on a farm, I don't know
And
how
then,
it is in the US. In
okay.
Canada, all farm products are tax exempt. So
Yep.
so we don't have to
Yep.
charge any GST on
Yep.
anything.
And hang on, I want to go back though. You're getting ahead of yourself. Let where it says income account,
Yes.
that is where it's going to show up on your income statement. So right now it's just generically going to sales.
Yep.
You might want to have restaurant sales. You might want to say, greenhouse products or field products. So this is your opportunity to get a little more detail in the kind of sales, because if everything just goes into one broad category of sales, you're losing an opportunity to, get some richness in your data.
Right. So
So
do you set
the
that up at a different time than doing this, or can you do it all when you're adding a product?
Well, I would, before we set it up, I would want to think about how do you want to track your categories of sales?
Right.
Um, do you want to track it by greenhouse and field, or do you want to track it by restaurants and supermarkets or
That's a good
retail?
question. I think I would like to have restaurant sales, wholesale, which would be the distributor aggregator type things, and then
Mhm.
the stores. I would divide it all into those three because that's really all we sell to now. If I was still doing farmers markets, I'd put that in, and if CSA,
Yep.
I'd put that
Yep.
in. So you'd
Yep.
have to do on the other, not in this screen. You have to set you could go and set those up individually,
Well,
right?
you could actually set it up right now. It'll,
Oh,
you can type in wholesale and it'll say wholesale doesn't exist. You want to create it? And you say, well, as long as we're here, sure.
interesting. Okay, and so when you're making an invoice, then Are
Mm-hmm.
you going to have to do that each time, or would it remember for the customer? You would be like, this customer is in this category. So as soon as I create an invoice for that customer, it's going to populate what those products are for.
No, and this is, this is something that QuickBooks is not great at. So you have to create a separate item for each income category.
Okay.
So, because every time you enter spinach onto an invoice, it's going to go to that category. Okay, so you can just go ahead and create wholesale categories just on the spot here. Because you'll type in wholesale and it'll say it doesn't exist. You want to exist, create it.
Hit enter, I guess.
Oh, is it really not? No. Oh, I guess hit enter and see what happens.
Yeah.
No, it's not letting you. That's too bad. Click on that pull down menu and see if there's an option to, if you scroll all the way to the top, does it say add new?
No.
Oh, let's, huh.
So I
Okay, so
might have
maybe
to
you
do
have
it
to do
somewhere
it.
else.
Yeah. In the desktop version, you can just do it on the fly like that. So, um, yeah, you can't do that, I guess.
Oh,
But you
that's
can just,
weird.
yeah. So you can just go ahead and make it sales just generally.
Okay.
That's fine. And actually, one of the nice things, though, is that QuickBooks is pretty agile that way, that if you go back and change it, it'll go back and change every single invoice that you've created.
Oh, okay. That's good to know. That's good to
Yeah.
know. You're
So,
not
like,
locked. You're not locked in with that with something.
yeah, yeah, you can go back and say, oh, all of spinach is actually going to go to, restaurant sales.
Right. And then
So,
can you make like a quick key? Would that be the SKU? So when you're populating an invoice, can
yeah.
you?
Um, Yeah, I think you could use a SKU. The other thing is it autofills. So if you
Yeah. Oh,
start
it
typing
does.
SP,
It'll
then it'll
brilliant.
start to autofill. Or and I'm trying to think, like, you might have spaghetti, squash, and spinach, so you might have to
Right. Yeah.
scroll a little bit, but it starts to autofill, so it goes pretty quick actually.
And you
And if you're
can
good with tabs and arrows and
right. Yeah.
you know,
Exactly. And you can put like a little image in here or something. You can attach
yep,
an image. Okay.
yep,
Brilliant.
yep.
Is there any?
And then the nice thing,
No. Go ahead.
then once you have the items entered in here, there is a report where you can see all your sales by item. So not
Yes.
only do you see what did I sell to wholesale, but I can see how much spinach did I sell.
Yeah. That's
And
that's key for farmers. I mean, that's key for any
mhm,
business, obviously, but
yeah,
it's great for farmers
well,
because it's good to analyze. Like, what are your top producers? Let's grow more of
yep,
those. Let's grow less of the
yep,
things that we didn't sell a lot of.
yep. And also, if you're trying to figure out your cost of production, if you know that I grossed, 5 um, a kilo of spinach over the course of or not a kilo, but um, a couple 100 pounds of spinach over the course of the season. How much revenue did I earn, and how much did it cost me? It's like,
Yeah.
okay, the spinach seed was this, and it takes me this much time to prepare a spinach bed, and this much time to harvest a spinach bed, and the boxes cost me this much, and the bags cost me that much. So when you know your yield, it's easy to sort of tease apart your expenses and figure out your cost of production.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
So, spinach may earn you a lot of revenue, but it may not necessarily earn you a lot of profit.
Yes.
And this is about profit.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what you can do is you can create invoices. And you can see right there at the top where it says all sales. Next to that is invoices. Send your first invoice. So then QuickBooks is also tracking what you're selling. So see where it says due date?
Yes.
So that due date right there is what's going to help you track who owes you and who's overdue.
Of course.
And you might have different terms, like some customers might have to pay you within a week, some you might give 30-day terms for. So it makes it a lot easier to sort who owes you by how much.
So when I create, if I create an invoice right now for a customer and I
Hmm.
put these terms in, will
Yep.
it
That
will it lock it to that customer? So next time okay.
Yes, so the terms will be locked in.
That's amazing. Is it also possible to create a sort of standing order where
You can memorize these things. You can memorize the invoice.
where do you do that?
Um, that's actually an excellent question because this is one of those things that I know on
It's
the
in
desktop version.
right.
Oh, make recurring right there at the bottom.
Oh, make reoccurring. Brilliant.
Hmm.
Wow.
Yep.
And you could just modify a couple things if you had to, but
Yep.
wow, that's great. That's really great.
Yeah. So, when you put in the due date here, then QuickBooks starts tracking. So you can go to the reports. I don't know. Can you see the sidebar where it says reports? I can't see it from my view.
Reports.
Ah, there we go. On the right. And you can go to the AR aging summary report.
And this is where you figure out who is got
Overdue and
overdue.
whatnot.
Yeah,
Hmm. And right now you don't have anything in there, so
yeah,
this report will be empty.
right. But
But
that's really
you
good.
can track who owes you. Yeah, so it just makes it easy. You can get a quick snapshot of who owes you, and you know who to go after.
Yeah, it's so important. It's so important.
Yeah,
I do that. I mean, my habit has always been I do it every month. I go in
yeah,
every month and I basically produce statements for everybody who might be overdue, and then I email them the statements. The nice thing about
yep,
QuickBooks Online is that it's connected online. So I
right.
imagine it's probably pretty easy to forward these statements. There's probably even a way to automate it, isn't there?
Uh,
Because
Maybe,
it
yeah,
asks for email addresses and stuff. I know when you put in. So because I mean I've done
yeah,
business with people who use QuickBooks, and I get an email that's like, hey, this is overdue. You owe it, and it
yeah,
looks like
yeah,
it
yeah,
was
yeah.
generated by QuickBooks.
Yep. And I'll be honest, I haven't gotten into that feature. You're asking these great questions about its capacity. It's I'm glad that you're asking them. They're good, and it's worth exploring. And sometimes part of it is just recognizing the possibility that if you think about the possibility, you can find it. If
Yeah.
you can't even imagine the possibility, then it's hard to look for it. But that's funny. Richard Wiswall, is also king of farm bookkeeping and farm financial management. And I think he said something to the effect, you're losing money if you don't keep track of who owes you money.
Of course.
Um, you
Of
know,
course.
it's just you're just throwing it away if you don't bother to follow up on your customers, and if you don't have a good way to track your invoicing, then you don't know who really owes you, and you
That's
leave
right.
money on the table.
What do you think about using QuickBooks as a pay service? Because I know it's like 2.5%. Um,
Hmm.
is do you see a lot of farmers actually doing that as a pay service, like
This
collecting
is
payment through there?
yeah. Well, this is an interesting question, and I know a lot of farmers struggle with this. That whether you take credit cards or PayPal, you're paying a service fee of anywhere from 2.5 to 3%,
Yeah,
and farmers get really irritated that "Ugh, I can't believe how much money I'm paying on credit card fees,"
yeah,
but you're getting paid,
that's right.
and I think about a client that I would have lost her business if I didn't take credit cards, so I would have had zero sales
That's right.
instead of whatever sales I had. So are you losing customers? And if you don't take credit cards, do you risk not being paid at all? That
Exactly.
you've got a couple of delinquent accounts, and if you say, "Oh, well, I take credit cards. Everybody has a credit card," they have no
Exactly.
excuse not to pay you.
That's right, because you can show up and be like, hey, well, I've got the Square on my phone or however to do it, and you're ready to go. A friend of mine has a great
Yep.
saying. He says, the more ways you have to get paid, the more you get paid.
Right.
So
Yes.
why not? It's a tool in the toolkit. You don't have to
Mhm.
exclusively take payment through credit cards.
Right.
But if the option's
Right.
there, then the chances are better that you're actually going to get paid.
Yeah, and I've seen, I have one client who actually charges a 5% surcharge at the farmers market for paying with the credit card,
Great.
just to discourage people from paying with credit card.
Yeah.
But you need to build up that loyalty with your customers to be able to pull that off. Not
Yeah.
everybody can pull that off.
I mean, it depends on the market you're at, but I find it's very rare that people want to pay with credit card at a farmer's market. Most people assume that you pay cash, but
Mm,
that's changing. That's changing.
yeah. Yeah, I think it really is. I mean, we're becoming a cashless society.
I know,
And,
which
you know,
I don't
everybody,
know how I feel about that. I don't know if I
I
like.
don't like it.
Yeah, I don't like. I love cash.
I do too.
Even though I don't even really make cash anymore because I don't sell at farmers markets, I still like to have cash. I'm just old school. I like to know,
Mhm.
I like to feel that I'm putting out something. You know, with digital payments, it's
Yeah.
just the payment's gone. With cash, you
Yeah.
might have, I usually keep, a few $100s in my wallet. And it's like, okay, oh, wow, I went through that $300 really
Yeah.
quickly, you
Well,
know?
it makes you a lot more aware of what you're spending. And the interesting thing somebody pointed out to me the other day is, especially for small businesses, it's really important to recognize the impact of credit card fees. That 3%. Well, first of all, Walmart isn't paying 3% on credit cards; they're probably paying 2% on credit cards. But the volume of sales that they do, they
Yes.
can afford paying 2% for the credit cards. But a small business that's only earning $100,000 to begin with, they're going to lose, $2,000 right there to credit card
Significant.
fees or 2,500. Yeah, that's significant, and that's money in their pocket. So, as you think about supporting small local businesses as a consumer, and obviously we're talking to the business owners, we're not necessarily talking to the consumers, but I think it's important that the consumers recognize the impact that they have with small businesses, and if they really want to help them succeed, paying cash is a great way to do that.
Absolutely. So there's a lot here. Like we could go
Yeah.
on all day with this. Um,
Yes.
what so what do you think? Like maybe a few takeaways is like what are some things people can do now to start sorting themselves out? Because I imagine a bunch of my viewers are going to watch this and go, "This is going to seem intimidating to them." They're going to be
Yep.
like, "Oh my God, I've got these mountain of receipts." And maybe they're
Mhm.
feeling inspired this year to sort it out finally. Like let's get it clean, let's start fresh. What are some things that you
Yep.
would say to people, like some takeaways, like to jump into right away that they can just start with?
Yeah, well, one of the things that people get all excited and ambitious, and they're like, "Oh, well, I'm gonna catch up on last year." Um, don't catch up on last year. Just start from today,
Yeah.
um, because the more you can do to keep it manageable, the better. Um, there's so many ways that this can become an overwhelming and daunting task, and just starting today, not worrying about what you did historically. Number one. Number two, you don't need to set up all your items and all your customers and all your everythings all at once. Do it as you go along. That, as you sell a bunch of spinach, add spinach to your item list. And as you sell to this customer, add that customer. That you don't need to do it all at once.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I think that's really important. And I think, just kind of keeping your eye on the prize is really helpful too. Just, figuring out the questions that you want to answer. Do you want to know which markets are most profitable? Do you want to know what crops are most profitable? Um, what do you want to know about your business, and start thinking about how can I answer those questions better?
Mm-hmm.
Because the better you get your information into QuickBooks, the more easily um, you can do that.
Yeah.
So
That's great. That's really good advice. So we'll leave it there. But anybody who wants to know, this is Julia's book. Get her book. I will have the links below. I'll have the link to your course as well down below. And if people want to just check you out, your website, we'll put that down below as well.
Yep, thefarmersoffice.com.
Awesome. Thanks a lot,
Yeah.
Julia.